In 1934, entrepreneur Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson formed the company National Allied Publications and released the first American comic book with original content, titled New Fun, The Big Comic Magazine, issue number 1. Not the most memorable title, but the first of its kind nonetheless. The company's third release, Detective Comics, would not only become one of the longest-running comic book series in the United States, but also gave the company its name, which means DC Comics stands for Detective Comics Comics. In 1938, DC released a comic book which would completely reinvent the medium. With the release of Action Comics issue number 1, they introduced Superman and along with him the new archetype now known as superheroes. Not long after Superman's debut, Detective Comics issue number 27 saw the introduction of Batman. For many decades to come, DC, much like its rival Marvel, would struggle in this very unstable comic book industry. To counteract this decline, DC decided to reimagine or simply update many of its characters, starting in the mid-1950s. This trend proved to be very popular with fans and continues to this day. If we skip to 2011, DC did something quite extreme. They decided to reboot its entire line of comics with something called the New 52. Essentially, this was done to allow new fans to more easily get up to speed, of course, with these extremely long-running comics, but also to fix major continuity problems and the extreme complexity several decades worth of comic books create. Without getting into too much detail, Superman learned how to put on his underwear before the suit. Comic Sans is a ubiquitous typeface more or less globally hated by everyone ever. If you somehow don't hate it, you just haven't been exposed to it long enough. I mean, it works for comic books, maybe, I guess. But if you want something to be taken seriously, you should really stay away from using this typeface. And DC Comics is actually indirectly responsible for its creation. You see, the font was designed based on the lettering style of the two comics The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. So, in a sense, Batman is responsible for Comic Sans. In the New 52 Action Comics issue number 14, astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson appears as himself within the story. His character determines that Krypton, Superman's long-destroyed home planet, orbited a star named LHS 2520 in the constellation of Corvus, 27 light-years from Earth. This information is actually completely accurate, and Tyson worked with DC to find a suitable real-life solar system in which a fictional planet like Krypton could potentially exist. Before and during the so-called Silver Age of comic books, stories involving gorillas were for some reason really popular, not just in comics but in movies and mainstream media overall. Realizing this, DC wanted to cash in on this new trend and thus increase the number of gorillas appearing in their comics. This fad continued well into the late 1980s, and it resulted in some pretty bizarre and just ridiculous covers and stories. It became so popular that DC began placing gorillas on the cover of many comics just to see an increase in sales, even if the comic itself had nothing to do with gorillas, and even when it did, it was often in the form of some short, contrived subplot spanning just a few short panels. Eventually it started to get out of hand, so they had to enforce a rule at the company that there could be no more than one gorilla cover per month. In the previous video I made about Marvel, I listed some of Marvel's strangest characters. I think the most odd character was Scream, who had a unique ability to transform into ice cream. Well, DC Comics take the strange and bizarre to a whole new level. Let's begin with Danny the Street. He, or rather it, is a living, sentient transvestite street. Yep, you heard me right, a living transvestite street. That's a thing. Then we have Dog Welder, who does exactly what his name suggests. He fights crime by welding dead dogs to people's faces. His so-called abilities are even listed as dog welding. I can't even make this shit up. A villain named the Hemogoblin was a white supremacist vampire who drank AIDS-infested blood only to bite and thus infect black people. Codpiece is a villain that was told that he wasn't big enough in high school. The girl who said it was referring to his height, but he took it as if she meant his penis. Due to an ever-growing inferiority complex about his size, he decided to build a robotic suit. This suit was equipped with a weapon in the form of a cannon, sticking out from the groin area to show the world that he does indeed have a large and powerful dick. What the fuck? It's been known for quite a while now, but in 2016 we'll finally get to see Batman and Superman go head-to-head in Superman vs. Batman: Dawn of Justice. What many people don't know is that this could have happened back in 2002, when DC wanted to get a new Batman film off the ground. While the script can be found online, it never got any further than that, and no actors were ever attached to the project. But it gives us a quite interesting what-if scenario. For example, it's likely that the Dark Knight trilogy wouldn't have been made if this film had been released. Another cancelled film that got much further into development was Superman Lives. It was to be directed by Tim Burton, and Nicolas Cage was supposed to star as Superman. One of the defining characteristics of Batman is that he doesn't kill. He always tries to capture villains and criminals and then let the authorities deal with them. In the beginning, this was not the case. For 2 years after his introduction in Detective Comics issue number 27, he not only brandished a gun at times, he even killed many of the enemies he faced. In his very first appearance, he punched a guy into a tank of acid, and the plan was for Batman to actually kill the Joker as well. They eventually enforced the do not kill and no guns policies, as it was more befitting the character's traumatic past. Stan Lee has actually written a couple of comics for DC with his Just Imagine series. In it, he reimagined some of DC's most popular characters, like depicting Batman as African American, turning the Flash into a woman, and Aquaman can transform into a being made of liquid water. He also renamed many of the characters to follow his trademark naming practice of using first and last names that start with the same letter. So Batman became Wayne Williams, Wonder Woman became Maria Mendoza, and Green Lantern was renamed Len Lewis. The explanation for Superman's symbol, the S-shield, has been revised multiple times over the years. For decades, the comics simply said it was nothing more than a stylized monogram designed by Clark and his adoptive parents. But in the 1978 feature film Superman the Movie, it was said that the S was not an S, but instead a Kryptonian glyph that served as the family seal for the House of L. It wasn't until 2003 that the comics adopted this explanation as well, and also explained that it's an ancient Kryptonian symbol which means hope. In the comics Superman/Batman, wait, is it Superman/Batman or just Superman Batman? Or maybe Superman and Batman? Or versus. In this comic, issue number 50, it's revealed that Batman's father, Thomas Wayne, stumbled upon Kryptonian technology and met Superman's father, Jor-El, when his consciousness was transported to Krypton. Thomas Wayne appears in a holographic form, and Jor-El wants to know what kind of world the Earth really is. Thomas convinces Jor-El that the Earth is more or less good enough, and thus Batman's father is responsible for sending Superman to Earth. And the Kryptonian technology he found was later used to revitalize his company Wayne Enterprises, which means that Kryptonian technology would later serve as the basis for much of Batman's crime-fighting gadgets.